Well, the issues identified with BVAS has nothing to do with hacking. I have some degree of confidence that external parties will not be able to hack into our INEC database. If they are going to do anything on the BVAS, it must be using the BVAS, working with people who are these BVAS machines are assigned to.
Okay. Now, having said that, with your level of confidence, you at some point last month had called for a software upgrade of the ABIs, like the BVAS and the ABIs. And of course, I'd like to know if the issue of mock accreditation, which is currently ongoing, would help, or has it in any way help address the concerns you raised with that software upgrade that you recommended at the time?
No, the issues I raised about BVAS is entirely different from what they are doing with the mock exercise. The mock exercise has reviewed some things which we will come to in a minute. But for the software upgrade I mentioned during last month's press briefing was specifically that the BVAS has two major flaws. One is that the BVAS measures only the number of successful accreditations. By this, I mean that there are people who show up on the election day with their INEC-issued PVCs, and BVAS is not able to authenticate them. In the last electoral regime, for these kind of people, INEC issues them with what is called incident forms. But again, politicians found a way to compromise that incident forms, right? So in this new electoral regime, no incident form is issued. But the problem is this, that once you show up on the election morning and the BVAS is not able to authenticate you, that BVAS does not account for you. What do I mean by this? If 10 people, for instance, show up in a particular polling unit on the election morning and the BVAS accredits only 6 of them, BVAS accounts for only 6. And BVAS does not tell you that, oh, we rejected 4 people. So I was asking for a software updates, so that the BVAS will tell Nigerians the amount of Nigerians that, because each election, like you saw in Anambra, in Ekiti, or Osun, what people report is low voter turnout. And in some instances, it's right. But in my own analysis, and from the field reports that I based those analysis on, we have a number of people who show up on the election morning and BVAS is not able to accredit them. And so we wanted to have INEC measure that data to show Nigerians that out of 93 million Nigerians, perhaps 40 million showed up, and out of 40 million, BVAS was able to complete 37 million successful accreditations. And then why is this important? And why does this have to impact on the integrity of the electoral process or the outcome? If you look at the ABIS data, ABIS means the software that disqualified 2.78 million Nigerians. Remember that when INEC concluded its continuous voter registration exercise in July of last year, 2022, it went, the 12 million registrations went through the software called ABIS, and ABIS invalidated the registration of 2.78 million Nigerians. Now, out of these 2.78 million Nigerians, 49.3 of them were coming from 2 regions, right? And then there was a national rejection rate of 22%. For the 4 other regions of the North and the Southwest, you had an average rejection rate of 17%. But for the Southeast and the South-South, you had a rejection rate of 35.2%. And you're able to see this number to say, are you possibly technically suppressing the votes of a particular region by unfairly disqualifying potential voters from that region? And then you can make that argument because you have data. In the case of the BVAS, there is no way to measure because there is a simulation now that the BVAS may have high accreditation rates in some regions and then may have low accreditation rates in other regions as a way to technically tamper with the wishes of ordinary Nigerians, especially when you confer advantages on areas considered opposition strongholds and areas considered establishment strongholds. So because the BVAS is not measuring this data, it is easy to compromise the elections and nobody can prove that the elections has been compromised using merely accreditation figures, because you have looked at the voter register and they tell you the Northwest has so and so million of registered voters, the Southeast has so and so million of registered voters. They give you state by state analysis, but on the election day, if those people come out and the BVAS fails to authenticate them, there is no measurement, there is no data that is tracking that. That is one of the flaws with the BVAS, and I asked for a minor software update. It wasn't done. Number 2, the BVAS, owing to these security systems, does not connect to the server in real time for voter accreditation. It does not connect to the server in real time for voter accreditation. What does this mean? That the BVAS for a particular polling unit is before the election day preloaded with the data of all the registered voters in that particular polling unit. So you are in Enugu today and pick a random polling unit in Enugu today, maybe in Enugu South, right? And the BVAS that will be sent to that particular polling unit will have the records of all the registered voters in that polling unit. So we're now saying that if you are going to load all the data of registered voters per polling unit per BVAS deployed, right, that is fair enough to prevent hacking and to prevent network jam during authentication of the PVCs. But the flaw is this, that compromised INEC staff can, for a polling unit that is 300, load the data of 100 people, and then the 200 people that their data is not loaded on the BVAS will come on the election morning, will wipe their faces, will show their fingerprints, will bait, will do everything. The BVAS will not recognize them simply because their data was not included on the BVAS. Now, what the BVAS shows you on the election day is that there are 300 registered voters on this particular polling unit, but the BVAS does not tell you the details of those 300 voters. For instance, a polling station that has 300 voters, if you load the correct information of 100 people and then load the incorrect information of 200 people, you have technically taken away 200 possible votes from that region or from that polling unit. So these things are not measured, and we say that these lapses are lapses politicians working in concert with compromised staffers of INEC can rely on to compromise the integrity of the elections. The last thing about the BVAS is what you saw from Osun elections, and I think INEC has said that they have improved on it, and there is no data to prove that they have improved on it, is that the BVAS does two layers of transmission. It does one transmission when it's idling away. That's when the voting process is ongoing. As the BVAS is accrediting people, anytime it senses a connection to the internet, it uploads the accreditation data on the server. But now, at the end of the election, the electoral officer in charge, I think there's this APO, Assistant Presiding Officer 1 or 2, that's in charge of the BVAS, is required by INEC guideline to press send. So once you press that send, the send button initiates the sending of the polling unit results to the portal and the sending or uploading of the total number of accredited votes on the portal. So in the case in Osun State, INEC officials in some instances failed to press send. In some cases, INEC officials, whether deliberately or otherwise, captured and uploaded results apart from EC8A. So by law, you are supposed to capture from EC8A. But if you snap a newspaper and upload, the newspaper will be reflected on the INEC portal. So we don't know why INEC trained people did not upload the real results, but instead uploaded other forms. Right? So is it an issue of compromise? And is it so you have a lot of issues with this? And finally, on this BVAS, I made these presentations to political parties, especially the political parties who are indeed desirous of winning this election. And I am not as much as disappointed with INEC as I am disappointed with these political parties. Because fundamental understanding of democracy means that democracy is a demand and supply. If you don't demand good governance, you will not get good governance. By the way, INEC has done an incredible job with mobilizing resources. If you look at the number of polling units in Nigeria, 176,000, multiplied by 3 staffers, multiplied by collation agents, multiplied by collation officers, you will see the number of people that will be required to pull off this exercise. On the account of INEC, you will need about nearly 400,000 people to be hired, to be trained to do this exercise. And so, if there are flaws with INEC systems, it is left for the political parties to canvass and insist that these flaws be identified and rectified before the elections. But the political parties have carried on in a manner that suggests to me that they are not indeed serious about the elections. Because while they have been busy doing voter mobilization, going to rallies, attending stakeholder meetings, calling for people, doing grassroots mobilization, and I say that all those work are important. But in a developing country like Nigeria, if you don't match that kind of voter mobilization work up with another work, which is insisting that the systems and the processes that INEC will rely on to process the voting decisions of Nigerians are further improved, then you can be sabotaging your efforts at the polls. And I pray that this is not the case with 2023.
Hopefully, this shouldn't be the case. So, as we try to round up this, I'd like to know your opinion. Do you think INEC is fully ready to deliver and conduct credible elections with the deployment of BVAS, especially as the election draws really near?
Well, if you look at Nigeria's history, what I can see is that Nigeria has made substantial progress in election management. From an outright annulment in 1993 to ballot box snatching and stuffing of ballot papers by thugs in 1999, we are now in a place where if you needed to snatch ballot boxes, you don't have to hire thugs. All you have to do is to go to the Supreme Court and attempt to snatch that ballot paper in the Supreme Court. You have the incidents of Lawan and Mechina, which was just decided, and you also had the issue in Imo State. So we are in a place where the weakest link to electoral law seem to be the judiciary. That's on its own. But again, because Nigeria has been improving or increasingly migrating to data or to tech-backed conduct of elections, you also see that when the card reader was advertised, they told us, oh, that card reader was working so wonderfully well. Nobody queried the card reader. We saw the many failures of card reader, although that the failure of card reader is quite an improvement on the previous authentication process. Today, what we have is a BVAS. The BVAS is quite an improvement on the card reader, and then the card reader was an improvement on manual accreditation. So we have something going for us. It is not yet perfect. So what I invite Nigerians to do, especially this close to the elections, where no fundamental change can be made whatsoever to INEC systems, because it will be too late. As at the time we started making those calls, if the political parties engaged, they would have insisted that these programs these softwares be upgraded. But today, it is too late to make even a minor upgrade on the softwares that will be deployed for the elections, right? Because if you do that, you have to reconfigure 176,000 BVAS devices, and it's not a tea party, right? So what I see is that after the elections, Nigerians, regardless of the outcome, will insist on further cleaning up of the voting and election process. One, the voter register is riddled with several fake and underage voters, even as we speak. So Nigerians will have to have that conversation. Are we going to build on this voter registration data? Are we going to dismantle this voter register and create an entirely new one? Or are we going to find an intelligent software that will clean the many incidences of fake and underage registrants on that register? That is number one. Then number two, how can we further streamline and strengthen the accreditation and results transmission process of INEC? So election management is a continuous improvement journey. So I expect Nigerians, when they submit this election to themselves to this election, and whatever the outcome is, not to despair, but to continue to make cases for the continued improvement of Nigeria's election process. If you look at Nigeria from 1993 to now, we have made substantial improvements, but it is not yet Uhuru. That's why Nigerians should not go to bed with two eyes closed. Unfortunately, for the many political parties contesting in this election, especially the opposition political parties, they have gone to bed with two eyes closed, and I hope that they get the kind of results they want.
And we hope that it really gets better as we progress. Thank you very much, Mr. Chima Christian. And of course, it was good to have you on news today.
Thank you so very much for having me.